analyst, of course, former NFL quarterback. There's a lot going on with quarterbacks in the NFL, particularly Derek Carr, which is where we will get started today here on the Herd. So if you hadn't seen the news, Carr is stepping away from the Raiders after being benched for the last 2 games. They have decided they are going with Jarrett Stidham for the final 2 games. Now, I realize that the Raiders are essentially eliminated from playoff contention. They are still mathematically alive, but I think it's about a 1% chance that they make the playoffs at this point. But there is a chance. So because they are doing this, because they are moving away from Derek Carr to Jarrett Stidham, who has in 11 games in his career, 2 touchdowns and a 52.5% completion rates. They are trying to pitch us that they're leaning into the young players. You're going to see what's going on with the young guys because the Raiders are a young team now, apparently. I'm not buying any of this. Raiders fans shouldn't buy any of this. And I think it's time we just give the Raiders their due for being as dysfunctional of an organization as we have in the NFL. The Raiders brand is huge. It is historical. The fan base is wildly popular, very famous, have their antics, and it's great. They have a beautiful new stadium in Las Vegas, one of my favorites personally. I am a logistics nerd, so being able to walk across a pedestrian bridge into the stadium and walk out and get an Uber very quickly, I love it. Wonderful experience there at Allegiant in Las Vegas. All that aside, what have the Raiders done that would give you any confidence that they are all of a sudden now moving off of Derek Carr, somehow going to get this right? Well, let's see. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at their first round picks, right? A good team that has first round picks should have some of them in the last 3 years still on the roster, right? Clean and Farrell, Josh Jacobs, 5th-year option decline, 5th-year option decline. Jonathan Abram, cut. Damon Arnett, cut. Henry Ruggs, cut. Alex Leatherwood, cut. All right, so no help from the draft. So it should go well if they want to draft a player to replace Derek Carr. Well, Josh McDaniels, he has a great resume of drafting quarterbacks, right? Who was that guy that he took? Tim Tebow. That inspires confidence. Josh McDaniels himself, what in his resume would make you think that he's capable of turning this around? Well, if he was the offensive coordinator with Tom Brady as the quarterback, I'd feel great. Even if Tom Brady does come to the Raiders, which if I put my tinfoil hat on, maybe that's what they're up to here. We don't know if Tom Brady's going to retire. I certainly think he is. But even if Tom Brady was to come here, Josh McDaniels isn't the offensive coordinator. He's the head coach. So he still has to fix everything else. Like perhaps the defense that's the worst in the league and has the least amount of sacks out of any defense in the league. Maybe that has something to do with all these halftime leads that they blew. Now, look, I am not going to absolve Derek Carr for what happened with the Raiders this season. And by all accounts, they are very disappointing. This entire division has been mostly disappointing. I mean, the Chargers are now clinched in the playoffs, so they are progressing, thank God. Like with a young emerging star quarterback, they have now gotten everybody healthy. The defense is playing well with the defensive head coach, and they're taking a step up. And of course, the Chiefs are what the Chiefs always are. Broncos disaster. We'll get to them in a moment. But the Raiders are really disappointing. You brought Devontae Adams here. You have stars on defense. You have some stars on the offensive side of the ball. You have a steady quarterback in Derek Carr. You were in the playoffs last year. What happened? How did it all fall apart? Am I to believe that this is all Derek Carr's fault? The guy that has held this organization together through everything. I don't have time today. It would bore you for me to list the endless book of things that have happened since he's been there in his tenure with the Raiders. We give Baker Mayfield this everlasting pass for all the coaches that he has had to deal with, all the turmoil that he went through in Cleveland. Derek Carr's had 6 head coaches. every year he has to reset into something new. I'm not going to give him a pass entirely on how he's played this year. He hasn't been great. It's been disappointing. I get it. But what am I supposed to believe here, Raiders? You're just punting on the rest of the season. I get it. It's going to be very difficult for you to win these last 2 games and make the playoffs. It's virtually impossible. But you're saying it is impossible. We don't care. We just want to move off of Derek Carr. And it's because we want to see the young players. We want to see what they can do. Is it that? Is it that, Raiders? Or is it that you owe him $33 million next season if he happens to get hurt in these last 2 games? I'm going to guess it's the $33 million. I'm going to guess it's that. If you want to move off of Derek Carr, fine. Maybe he's not good enough to get you over the edge. But here's what I caution the Raiders, because I have no faith that they're going to do the right thing and turn this around. Take a look at the Washington Commanders. I'm not the biggest fan of Kirk Cousins. I don't think Kirk Cousins is great. He's certainly having a nice season this season. He's certainly proving a lot of doubters wrong this season. He's having a nice year. Nobody really knows how this is going to go for the Vikings, but we know Kirk Cousins is a franchise quarterback. How things look when you leave does matter. How things go when you leave a place does matter if you're the guy. They've had 11 starting quarterbacks since Kirk Cousins has left. For all that, we're just going to keep franchise tagging him. We don't want to give him a long-term deal. Cool. Well, now you're back to Carson Wentz again as you're trying to make the playoffs after you are moving off of Taylor Heineke. So be careful what you wish for. When you want to jump on the quarterback carousel, you better have a plan. So if the plan is Tom Brady, I'm interested. I'm interested in watching that. I'll see how that goes. Because it's Tom Brady, not because it's the Raiders, not because it's Josh McDaniels or anything else that's going on there. I think it's disrespectful to Derek Carr after everything that he's done. Maybe this is a cutthroat business and I'm being a bleeding heart. But when you've had not a whole lot to cheer about in the last few years and the one guy that's been able to hold this all together through everything that you've thrown at him, your answer is to sit him for the last 2 games of the season. I don't know. I think I'm going to stop taking you seriously when you say you have a plan. That's what I'm going to do for the Raiders. And I'm sorry to Raiders fans because they really deserve better. It's a great fan base, and maybe they're frustrated with Derek Carr. Most of the Raiders fans that I've talked to are quite concerned about the future of the organization, and I think that's fair at this point. So staying in division, let's talk about Russell Wilson. So Russell Wilson spoke to the media yesterday. Obviously, Nathaniel Hackett was fired, which was mostly expected. It was a disaster for the Denver Broncos this season, considering the expectations, considering the trade, everything that they had the year before that was carried over, how the defense has played. It's been a dumpster fire. And Russell Wilson spoke about Nathaniel Hackett's firing yesterday.
First of all, obviously, devastated by Coach Hackett because I think he's an amazing man, amazing teacher, amazing father, just watching him with his kids and what he's been able to do and how he's taught the game for us. This season has been a season that we never thought it was going to happen the way it did. The reality is that, I wish I could have played better for him too, wish I could have played at the standard and the level that I've played, I've always played at and know how to play at. So, but what I do know is he's resilient. He's going to be a tremendous coach, like I said, and I love him to death, and everybody misses him for sure.
Now, Russ is going to say the right thing because that's what Russ does. And that's expected. But there's no 2 ways about this. Russell Wilson got Nathaniel Hackett fired. He did. His play got Nathaniel Hackett fired. So where do the Broncos go from here? Do they hire an experienced head coach? Do they bring in another young offensive upstart to try and fix Russell Wilson? I prefer that they bring in someone with experience because everything that's happened with the Broncos has been a disaster from top to bottom. I don't think it's a good idea to have somebody learning how to be a head coach on top of everything else that they're going to be responsible for in Denver. But to me, more than anything, this is on Russell Wilson. It's time for Russell Wilson to step up to the accountability plate. We've heard time and time again from Seattle, from former teammates, from Shannon Sharp on Undisputed a few days ago, from Andrew Whitworth saying he heard it, other former players, that Russ is really out of touch with what his role, not just with the Broncos is, but in the NFL. Russell's a star because of what he's done on the football field. And it's now morphed into a consistent